Today I wanted to sit down and film my January wrap-up video, and I decided to sit in here to do it because if I was to sit in front of my bookshelves like I usually do, there's just so much stuff to move. I'm actually moving into this room that I'm currently sat in, but this room has been getting decorated and things, so this room is quite empty, so it also might be a little bit echoey. Thought to myself about how I want to do these monthly wrap-up videos, because a lot of the ones that I watch on YouTube are just talking about books that people have read and finished, but I didn't want to film them like that. I wanted to actually talk about my reading as a whole. I figured that I'd like to make these wrap-up videos in the same way that I make my wrap-up posts on my book blog. In my wrap-ups on there, I talk about my reading month as a whole, and anything reading related in the month goes into the wrap-up post, and that's what I'd like to do with these videos. Now, I'm not going to talk about like my reading habits and things in these videos. I am just going to talk about the books, but I also wanted to include books that I haven't finished, I DNF. This is obviously the first one, so I'll kind of see how it goes. Because I'm making videos on this channel now with the intended purpose of myself watching it back, I did just want to have the ability to look back on it and see all of my reading for the month, not just the ones that I got finished. So I'm going to start with the books that I finished, and then go into like DNFs and books that I'm still currently reading. I'm going to talk about them in the order that I got them finished and completed. Hopefully it'll all make sense as the video goes on. The first book that I read in January was The Family Remains by Lisa Jewell, and I gave this book 4 stars. This is actually a follow-on to The Family Upstairs, which I actually read last year. I read it sort of beginning to mid 2025. I got really confused what year we were in then. And it was recommended to me by a family member, and then the same family member bought me this book for my birthday, and I started reading it last year, but I didn't get it finished until January. I enjoyed this book, but I didn't enjoy it as much as the first one. I found that the first one really gripped me all the way through, which was quite surprising. I'm not usually someone who would read this genre of book, so it was quite surprising to me to feel so gripped into the story. I did find that with both of the books I got on with the writing style, the way that it's sort of structured into the smaller chapters and then split up into the sections like part 1, part 2. I found that I really got on with that, especially as someone who likes to try and read chapter to chapter as often as possible. But if I'm being completely honest, and I believe I said this in my review of the book, I don't think that this book is completely necessary. It is necessary for someone like me who is quite a naturally nosy person. Like when I get to the end of the book, a lot of the time I do want to know what happened with the characters following on from the story. So it is always nice to get a sequel and a follow-on where those things are explained and you have it answered. And I did like this book for that aspect. However, in terms of just it being a book and its enjoyability factor, it was enjoyable, but I don't think it was necessary. I don't really feel like I gained or found out anything extra in this book. I mean, obviously I did plot-wise, because my own mind probably wouldn't have wrote the follow-on in the same way that Lisa Jewell did. I also found that the ending of the book was so much more gripping than the rest of it. Like, the first 2/3 of the book sort of plodded along, and then the end of the book seemed to really ramp up, and I just wish that the entire book was written in the same way and was as gripping all the way through, because that's what I found with the first one. So I feel like if this one had been the same, it would have been a little bit more effective. I'll read the back of each book to give context as to what the books are about, just because I find when I try to summarise them, I don't really always do it that well. Early morning on the foreshore of the River Thames, a bag of bones is discovered, human bones. D.I. Samuel Owusu, apologies if I've pronounced that wrong, quickly sends the bag for forensic examination. The bones are those of a young woman killed by a blow to the head many years ago. Also, inside the bag is a trail of clues which lead Di Owusu to a mansion in Chelsea where 30 years previously, 3 people lay dead while a baby upstairs waited for someone to pick her up. 4 deaths, an unsolved mystery, a family whose secrets can't stay buried forever. As I said, it was enjoyable, but it just wasn't as enjoyable for me as the first one. The next book that I read was Three's a Crowd by Kirsty McKellen, and I ended up giving this book 3 stars. You never forget your first, and the saying couldn't be truer for Daisy Malone, because the moment childhood friend turned Hollywood superstar Zach Dryden reappears in her life, she instantly remembers how she felt during the summer that changed everything. After weeks of flirting, the heat between them exploded in an electrifying, yet slightly embarrassing, night together. But then Zach left, Daisy moved on, and she knew their friendship and her heart would never be the same again. Now Zach is back, more charming and irresistible than ever, and offering her a once-in-a-lifetime trip to the Cannes Film Festival. Daisy has never found anyone who can compare with Zach, but she's reluctant to open her heart to him again. With so much history between them, can Daisy give their friendship a second chance, or will he always be the one who got away? This one was a strange one for me because I actually picked this book up very randomly. At the time that I found this and purchased it, the Works were selling some of their books for £1, and I am always looking for the next book that's going to take me by surprise. And I am also a big believer in picking up books that I've never heard of before, by authors I've never read before, and just seeing what they're about and seeing how they compare to other books that I read. I have also realised that I am really enjoying reading romance books at the moment, and romance is really the genre that's been picking up for me and that I have really gravitated towards, and this was my first romance book of the year. Was it a perfect book? No, not by any means. It is quite short, so it's quite easy to get through. It's 228 pages. It wasn't perfect, and there were a lot of frustrating things about this book, mostly plot-wise. However, as just a quick general book to add to the TBR, I think it can work for some people, and it's not the worst book I've ever read, but it definitely wasn't my favourite. The 2 male main characters in this book were very frustrating to me, and the way that they spoke to her and treated her, it just was not giving for me. I just found it just so much of an eye roll constantly. It just, I don't know, there was just something so frustrating all the time. To be honest, this is one of the books that I've read so far this year where I feel like I can actually remember the book and the story and the plot, and that doesn't happen very often for me. A lot of the time with my reading, I'm quite a forgetful reader, and that's fine until it comes to doing things like this, and then it's not very helpful. But with this, I found that I can actually remember it, but I feel like I can remember it because it was just so frustrating to me. And it really gave me the vibe of like that boy in school who's really mean to you actually secretly likes you, and I don't get on with that. That's not something for me. The next book that I read and finished in January was The Strawberry Patch Pancake House by Laura Gilmore, and I gave this book 3 stars. This is the fourth book in the Dream Harbour series, which is a series of books that I actually started reading last year and unintentionally got really interested and invested in. As a world-renowned chef, single dad Archer never planned on moving to a small town, let alone running a pancake house. But Dream Harbour needs a new chef, and Archer needs a community to help raise his daughter. Iris has never managed to hold down a job, so when it's suggested that Archer is looking for a live-in nanny, she almost runs in the opposite direction. Now Iris finds herself in a whole new world, one where her gorgeous new boss lives right across the hall and likes to cook topless. Keeping everything strictly professional should be easy, right? I am not gonna lie to you, when I read the back of this book, I was like, I do not want to read this. I mean, I wanted to read it to continue on the series, and I'm not someone who can skip books in a series, like that just doesn't work for me. So I knew I was gonna have to read it, but I was pretty certain that like I was gonna hate it from start to finish. And the opposite could not be more true. I absolutely devoured this book, and I would potentially go as far to say that this has been my favourite of the ones in the series that I've read so far. Again, like I said, romance has really been taking my fancy at the moment with my reading, and I think it's because I take the books really at face value. I take them for exactly what they are. Are they the greatest pieces of literature that's ever been written? No, but I enjoy it for what it is. I enjoy it for a book that is really easy to read. It's not complex. The plot really does not require me to do anything. I can sit down and read these books and not have to think about anything. They're just very easy reads for me to get through. And because I enjoy them for that and at face value, I think that's why I have such a positive reading experience for them. Like, I have not gone into any of the books in this series thinking that I'm gonna get some overly complex literary masterpiece, and that's not me shaming Laura Gilmore's writing, because I think for what she's trying to achieve with these books, she's doing a good job. I think, you know, if you look at them as romance, smut, spice, that's exactly what you're getting. It's exactly what you're getting. So if you look at them like that, they do well for what they're aiming to do. If you go into them looking for your next classic book and a really extravagant piece of literature, you're not going to get that, and you're going to be disappointed. Having said that, I was having a bit of a mental wobble in January, and something that happened last year was that it really put me off my reading, and I didn't actually get a book completed until the end of February, beginning of March. So for me to have read 3 books this month is already incredible going by my standards. And when I had my little mental wobble in January, I kept saying to myself, just pick your book up, even if you read 5 pages. Like, just keep picking it up. Don't let it put you into a slump. But this year I've managed to keep going, and I have been picking up books and keeping my reading going the entire time. Romance has really helped me with that, and I did really enjoy this book. I think I did, when I wrote my full review for this book for my book blog, I think I mentioned in it about why did I not give it 4 stars. Let me see if I can find it, because I've got my laptop here at the side of me. Full review, let me see what I put. Okay, in my like full review I put, so instead I'll leave with this. This book was one I thought would be a passing read, a contribution to my reading for the year, another statistic, one that I'll never think about again. And whilst it's not the greatest book I've ever read, and I stand by my opinion that they are not the greatest pieces of literature ever, I do have to say I really enjoyed my reading experience of this book, and it does make me excited to read the rest of the series too. And I do have to be honest that I am questioning why this one didn't get 4 stars from me. I stand by that. I don't know why I didn't give this 4 stars when I rated it, because I had a really positive reading experience with it. I really enjoyed the story, I enjoyed the plot, I enjoyed the writing of it for what it is, and I don't actually know what made me give it 3 stars and not 4. And this is probably one of the books that I've read where I would consider going back and changing my rating, because I do actually think there's a part of me that thinks that this book should have 4 stars from me. I don't think it's quite a 5-star, but I do think it definitely had the chance of earning a 4 star from me. Something else with this book and my reading experience at the beginning of the year is that on one occasion when I sat down to read this book, I actually sat and read about 160 pages in a day. Not all in one sitting, I did keep getting up and getting snacks and drinks and things like that, but in a day I got 160 pages read of this book, because it got to a point where I just couldn't put it down. I just wanted to know what happened. I wanted to know the story and the plot and where it was going. And like I said, when I read the back of the book before I started reading it, I was expecting to read this book thinking, I just can't wait for it to be over and to go on to the next one, because the whole single dad with the nanny falling in love is just not something that I gravitate towards, but I was actually really pleasantly surprised. And I think that part of that is because of the other plot points that play out throughout this book. There was something so beautiful to me about the way that Iris, the nanny, was interacting with Archer, who is the dad, and his daughter Olive, which is the little girl that she's coming to look after whilst he's working. The way that it speaks about that, the way that she's trying to care for her but not overstep in the circumstances, I think was really beautifully written at points. Obviously, like I said, it's not the greatest piece of literature ever. Taking it for what it is, it was really beautifully written. And I think because there were those other elements within the book, I think that's what made the plot of it more enjoyable than I thought it was going to be, because it had those other elements kind of playing out throughout it. So this is book 4 in the series, and we still hear about characters from book 1, book 2, book 3, and I anticipate that that's going to continue in the series. So when I pick up the next book in the series, which I do own, it's on my shelves waiting to be read, I anticipate that I'm going to hear a bit more about the characters that this book is based about as the series progresses. And I honestly cannot wait. I need to know what they're up to. I need to know how their story is continuing. And I really like that about this series. I like that I'm still getting updates about the characters that I've already read about. And for that reason, if you are going to read this series, I have seen discourse about it online, and I'm not here to police people's reading. You can do whatever you want, but please read the series in the order that they're published in if you're going to read it. You're going to have a much better reading experience with it. Something that I'm trying to do with my reading in the new reading year is tabbing books. Now, I haven't tabbed this one because my OCD-like brain couldn't stand the idea that the first 3 books in the series hadn't been tabbed and this one would have been. It doesn't work for me, so I chose not to tab this book. But I do have my reading journal and things, and I have been writing things down, and I always do that anyway. So I do have things that I can refer back to. And I have to say that there was part of this book where when I read it, the quote just got me. Like, I literally had the reaction of like reading the book, reading the quote, and then literally just being like, because it just got to me. I will tell you what the quote is, because I don't think the quote necessarily spoils the plot and the story. But in order to understand the true effect of it, you need to read the book. Like, you need to get the context to understand the actual impact of the quote. I wrote it down in my review, so I'll read it from there because I don't have my reading journal with me, so I can't remember the specific page that it's on. I know roughly whereabouts it is. She'd left 3 things on the kitchen counter that Archer found the next morning at 5 AM. A note for him, a note for Olive, and a box of Bisquick pancake mix. And that was the moment when I knew that this book really had got me, because it really like took me back to read it, and I really had a moment reading where I was like, oh my god, like their story together really has got me. Like, Laurie Gilmore really got me with this one. Those books won't be for everyone, I know. But like I said, taking them at face value and taking them for exactly what they are, I've really been enjoying reading them. So those are all of the books that I actually completed in January, and now I'm going to talk about a few books that I've picked up at varying stages and I've had varying experiences with. I'm going to start by talking about a book that I've actually decided to DNF, and that is Winter by Alice Smith. I put in this bookmark that I have just so that I would remember where I got up to, because I did give myself right until the end of January to decide whether I was actually going to DNF this book or not, and I think I've decided that I am. I actually started reading this in December, didn't quite get it finished, and I decided to carry on reading it in January because it does have themes of Christmas in it, but I found that I just don't have a pull or an urge to continue on with it, and for that reason I think it has to be a DNF for me. So with this one, I am going to be DNFing it, and I didn't get it finished. I mean I've just took the bookmark out. I think I read 100 and something pages, so I did kind of give it a really decent attempt, but unfortunately I didn't get it finished. When I DNF books, I am always open to the idea that I might decide to pick them up again in the future, and that is the same for this one, but right now it's just not for me. So I have decided to DNF this one. That was my only DNF for the month, and now I'm going to go into talking about the books that I'm currently reading. I do have a few books to mention, and I will explain how I've ended up in this particular situation and where I'm going to go from here, because there is actually 3 of them. So the first one is The Binding by Bridget Collins. As I mentioned, these are books that I'm currently reading, so I don't have ratings or anything for them. But I actually started reading this book before Christmas and didn't get it finished. I didn't really pick it up in January all that much. I think I picked it up maybe once or twice. And I'm currently on page 95. So I've made a dent into the beginning of the book, but I'm not very far into it. As I mentioned previously in this video, romance books have just really been taking my time and interest. This one has felt a little bit slow for me. However, I am very, 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 very intrigued to know where this book is going to go. So I don't want to DNF this one. And I am still holding on and giving it its chance. The next book is The Salt Path by Raina Winn. And again, I am not very far into this. This one I am 31 pages into, so really not that much, but it's not that big of a book. I actually picked this book up because last year I remember hearing discourse surrounding this book and how true it was and how accurate it was and all of this kind of stuff. So I just got really curious to know what the story actually was. I had this book sat on my shelves. I bought it a couple of years ago just randomly on a shopping trip to buy books, and it sat unread for a little while, and then when the discourse surrounding it happened last year, I had a little bit of a light bulb moment and I was like, I own that book, I'm gonna read it and see what it's all about. The reason that I didn't get through this much in January, I think, is because I was reading it whilst I was having my little mental wobble, and I don't think it was doing me any favours, which is why I sat it to the side for a little bit and I picked up my romance books that required absolutely nothing from me. And then the final book on the list that I am currently reading, and the one that I've actually been picking up more regularly recently, is Cleopatra and Frankenstein by Coco Mellors. This one I am carrying over to February because it does have that romance element and it's quite prominent within the book. I am currently on page 40, so I'm not very far into it. I didn't start reading this that long ago actually, and my reading has slowed a little bit because I have been seen to this room and I just haven't had the time or the energy. So far I am liking it. It is a little bit different to the other books that I've been reading recently, but I am liking it, and I have actually got to the part where they've just got married. So we're very early on in the book and they're already married, so we'll see sort of how that goes and where it takes the rest of the story. I have been really intrigued to read this book for a while, but another reason why I've also been intrigued to read this book is because I'm actually really anticipating reading Blue Sisters by Coco Mellors, but I always try to read an author's work in the order that it was published in. I feel like I get a more accurate representation of how their writing style has changed and developed over time. And I didn't do this when I read Sally Rooney's books. I read Sally Rooney's books in a different order than they were published in, and I felt like I just got a really mixed sense of her writing and how it's changed. So I am trying to read authors in the order that they're published in, and this was published before Blue Sisters, so that is why I have picked this one up before that one, when that one intrigues me a little bit more. Really looking forward to seeing where this book goes and how I enjoy it. If I enjoy it, who knows? Those are all of the books that I interacted with during the month of January. I think that I really like this structure of mentioning all of my reading in these videos, so I'm probably going to stick with it in future when I make these videos as well. So this has been my wrap up for January and all of my reading in January. These videos are similar to the monthly videos that I make, where I'm making them just for the sole purpose that I will have them to look back on. But if you've happened to stumble upon this video, I hope that you liked it, especially if you're into reading as well. And yeah, that is everything for this video. Thank you for watching if you did stumble upon it. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the February reading month now.